Welcome, everybody. I'm Jim Thorburn, president of Rocky Mountain Region Porsche Club, and I am proud to be the president of the best PCA region in the country. Looking forward to tonight's program. Like you, I hope to learn a few things. We started a Conversation With series when I first became president back in 2018. Dan Carlson and Alan Benjamin interviewed the world-renowned Porsche race car driver Patrick Long. It happened at the University of Colorado Events Center near Lone Tree, and 225 people attended. It was tremendously successful with fantastic reviews. Due to its success, we wanted to do more of these starting later this fall via webinar and eventually in person. Specifically, we thought it's appropriate to hold this webinar as a lead-in to our September Club Race weekend. We have an exciting agenda in store for you tonight. First, we'll do a quick overview of High Plains Raceway. Then we'll move to a video, a lap around HPR. And we will have a special treat at the end, an in-car video of Joe Bank performing a 1-minute, 47-second lap. Dan Carlson will lead a discussion about driving HPR and performance driving in general. He will also facilitate discussion with some of our region's best drivers, Joe Bank, Dale Hartzell, and Dave Stribling. And then we'll wrap up with a question and answer period. We hope to be done by 8:15 and no later than 8:30. Now I'd like to introduce this evening's host and moderator, Dan Carlson, leader of the Chief Driving Instructor team. Dan, as a driver, drove his first DE in 2004. By 2011, he was awarded Most Improved Male Driver. In 2019, he won the club's top performance driving honor at the Anita Moyle Distinguished Driver Award. Contributions to the club: he joined the Instructor Corps in 2012, became lead CDI at the end of 2015. In 2016, he won the Rocky Mountain Region Male Enthusiast of the Year. He currently serves on the board's Officer Nominating Committee, and as the leader of our HPDE program, CDI team, and instructors, he brought home the Pirelli Tire Award in 2019 for the top HPDE program in the nation. That's 145 regions. With that, I'll turn it over to Dan.
Well, thank you, Jim. That was a very nice introduction. Much appreciated. Well, welcome, everybody. Our goal tonight is to be both informative and entertaining, and regardless of your driving experience. And I'm confident that we'll succeed, so let's just dive right in. Since some of you are new to High Plains Raceway, I thought it'd be appropriate to give a brief overview of the track. Here's a quick look. You may not know that RMR is one of the 5 co-owners of High Plains Raceway. That's unique in the country. Our first events were in 2009. The full course is 2.5 miles with 15 turns, with the highway straight being the longest at a little over a half mile. There's 300 plus feet of cumulative elevation change per lap, and the steepest climb is 10%. Note that there is quite a horsepower loss from sea level at this elevation. If you had a 400 horsepower car at sea level, it'd be 340 out at HPR. Not many really have realized that there are 4 tracks in one. There are 4 courses. There's the full track, which we typically run. Then there's the North course, which we actually did at the Sunday of last July's DE. And the West course, which we'll do at the Sunday of our upcoming October DE. I doubt if we'll ever do the short course. Maybe we'll do that in an evening sometime. Here's a Google Earth photo of the track, and later we'll zoom in on various sections and discuss each, but I thought it'd be a good baseline to see what it looks like from the air here in its entirety. Now on to the video, or should I say videos. Fellow CDI Brian Bobich is the mastermind behind this 20-minute production. He did it all. We think that is one of the best instructional videos in the country, not only for PCA, but for everyone. Brian, we can't thank you enough. Much appreciated. And as Jim mentioned, we have a special treat. Joel Bank wanted to share his in-car video from his incredible minute 47-second lap, so we added that at the very end. And while you are watching, you will note that the current location on the track is in the upper left-hand corner of the screen, and you can also use the map of the track that was provided as part of an e-blast. So, Brian, let's get started.
Hi everyone, Flying Brian Bobbage with Rocky Mountain Region PCA here to take you on a lap around High Plains Raceway, one of America's greatest amateur road racing facilities and the motorsports gem of Colorado. We begin our lap coming down the front straightaway. As we cross the start-finish line, we take a peek at the starter's tower for any flags, with our primary vision focusing down the track, preparing for our first turn. We want to find a consistent braking point, using the orange bollards on the edge of the track and the number boards off to the right as a guide. Most laps, we will brake somewhere between the 2 and the 3, depending on our entry speed, the track conditions, and the braking capabilities of the car we're in. For manual transmission cars, we want to get our downshift done while still in the braking zone, trying our best to maintain consistent brake pedal pressure while blipping the throttle to get a clean rev match. Staying up against the right-hand edge of the track, we apply a firm squeeze of the brakes, holding that brake pressure until our speed adjustment is done. As we approach the 1 marker, roughly aligned with a single orange bollard at the track's edge, we get ready to begin our turn-in. Our vision is up and looking to the left, trying to locate our apex, which will be on the back side of the painted curbing on the inside of the turn. We mind our car position such that our passenger side wheels remain at the right-hand edge of the track surface until we actually begin our turn-in. As we turn the wheel towards the apex in one smooth motion, we taper off the brake pedal as we dial in more and more steering angle. Our vision is still up, spotting the exit of the turn on the right-hand side of the track. With our apex and track exit lined up in our vision, we start squeezing on throttle, reducing the steering angle smoothly and progressively as we simultaneously roll in more throttle. We let the car come all the way out to the right-hand edge of the track, right up against the track curbing to maximize our exit speed. If we try to carry too much speed, or turn in too early, and run out of track on the outside edge, we'll just drive straight off to the right. Turn 2 comes up on us fast. We want to work our way over to the left-hand side of the track, or as far over as we have time for, given our speed. We don't want to subconsciously slow down, however, and coast just for the sake of making it all the way to the leftmost edge of the track. And in some circumstances, the optimal line may be to just hug the right-hand edge of the track all the way from the exit of turn 1. We get our initial speed adjustment done by braking in a straight line, while physically turning our head to the right to spot our apex on the back side of the turn. Our turn-in with the steering wheel is slow, smooth, and progressive, imagining ourselves arcing the car down to our apex. With our hands slowly arcing our steering wheel in, we can begin using our throttle to help bring us around the turn. We're trying to work our way to maximum throttle as we pass our apex on the right and begin tracking out to the left. We want to accelerate assertively towards turn 3, with our eyes looking ahead and down the track. Again, no coasting in anticipation of our next turn. We will accelerate fully right up until we are ready to turn in. Turning our head to the right and attempting to look down our long straightaway, we do a quick lift off of our accelerator and immediately initiate our turn to the right once the weight has settled onto the front tires. Or, a slight tap on the brake may be necessary to ensure we have adequate weight transfer onto the front wheels for our turn-in. Ultimately, we want to time our turn-in so that it occurs right after our lift or slight brake. Once we've turned in, we immediately go back to throttle so we can begin accelerating for our longest straightaway of the lap. The idea is to make it all one fluid motion: lift, turn, and go. Or tap, turn, and go if we're including the brake. But the key to turn 3 is to always keep our vision focused where we want to go, which is down the straightaway, and avoid getting fixated on the left edge of the track or off in the dirt where we don't want to be. Depending on our car's acceleration capability, we may hug nearer to our apex on the right for a longer duration to shorten the total distance traveled down the straightaway. Or we will accelerate hard and use all the track we have to the left to maximize our terminal velocity at the end of the straight. As we travel down our longest straightaway of the lap, it's a great time to glance in our mirrors, check our gauges, and take in a few deep breaths. But we're still focused as far down the track as we can see, so we can spot any possible trouble ahead. It's always a good idea to keep an eye on the bunker ahead of the turn 4 braking zone, as any light or flag shown from this position will be our best opportunity to prepare for any issues around the next bend. We also want to check our grip on the wheel and make sure it's nice and relaxed. When we're tense and or not breathing, we won't be able to operate our controls smoothly, and we won't be as fast as we want to be. As we approach turn 4 with a full head of steam, it's important to use the number boards and bollards on the left edge of the track to find a consistent braking point. And we always want to review our mental checklist of what we can do if we suddenly find ourselves with no brakes. Should the worst occur, we will immediately begin pumping the brake pedal fiercely and try to regain some form of pressure in the system. And if we simply cannot slow down enough, our best option will be to drive straight off with our front wheels straight as we leave the track surface. But whatever happens, we must resist any urge to try and crank the steering wheel to the right and still make the turn. We will begin turn 4 with a very firm initial brake, ensuring we get an adequate speed adjustment before we even begin to think about our turn-in. We also want to make sure we get our downshifts done while we're still braking in a straight line. And remember, our eyes are up and our car remains in its position at the edge of the track until we're ready to turn. Our optimal focal point will usually be the turn 5 corner bunker, all the way past the exit of turn 4. By trying to spot the bunker as soon as possible, we'll guarantee our vision is nice and high and far ahead. We can use our peripheral vision to keep track of our apex. As we initiate our turn-in, we progressively bleed off our brake pedal pressure and transition to throttle as we make our apex. Our high and far vision helps us naturally turn in at the right point, not too early, not too late. The transition from brake pedal to gas pedal should feel imperceptible. We also want to be aware of how much of the apex curbing we're trying to use. A little curbing is okay to help straighten the radius of the turn, but getting up over the very top of it usually indicates we tried to turn in too early. Ultimately, unsettling the car that much will make it extremely difficult to utilize the extra speed gained and put us out of position for the next turn. As we continue to accelerate away from our apex, it's important to use all of the track width to the left and maximize our exit speed. Turn 5 arrives quickly. We'll need to work hard to make our way over to the right to open up the radius for our next turn, and we'll only get as far over to the outside as we have time for. Just like our transition between turns 1 and 2, we don't want to coast or subconsciously slow down just to make it all the way to the right-hand edge, nor do we want to be angled in the wrong direction when we begin the turn. We need to be mentally prepared, however, to get on our brake pedal promptly, as our turn-in point will come up very quickly. We may also need to fit in another downshift in our relatively short braking zone, depending on how many gears we dropped heading into the prior turn. Turn-in will be a little earlier than we'd normally expect, as our apex has lots of positive camber to help us turn. We can use the orange bollard on the right-hand edge of the track as a reference point for beginning our turn-in. However, as a general guideline, if we feel as though the car is fully settled and under control when we begin turning, we likely turned in too late. For such a small section of track, there's a lot going on between turn 4 and turn 5. We must be at least one step ahead mentally in anticipation to ensure we execute our turn-in promptly. As we feel the positive camber rimshot us around the turn, we accelerate assertively and track out all the way to the right-hand edge of the track. As we accelerate down our short chute towards turn 6, we smoothly transition from track right to track left. Heading into Danny's lesson, it's important to note we're accelerating downhill. This will compromise our ability to slow down and turn as the track surface is falling away from us. As we approach the pavement change, we brake firmly in a straight line to perform our initial speed adjustment and downshift if necessary. With turn 6 being an off-camber decreasing radius turn, there are several ways to approach it. On this lap, we begin the turn with a slight initial turn-in, allowing us to follow the left-hand edge of the track. We also maintain a slight brake to keep our front tires gripping as the track surface falls away from us. As we arrive at about the midpoint of the turn, we physically turn our head to the right to look down our next straightaway. This is also a great time to remind ourselves that sometimes a slow turn is just that, slow. We can't hustle our way through by simply dive bombing in with too much entry speed. Now that we can see where we want to go, we dial in more steering angle at a relatively quick and sharp rate to make our second apex. And once we feel the car pivot, we can begin adding in throttle progressively as we unwind our steering wheel and track out all the way to the left. The tendency for many drivers is to attempt to muscle their way through the second half of the turn, but we can't jump on the throttle hard if we still have lots of steering angle dialed in. We also can't go back to throttle if we haven't finished our pivot. Now accelerating down our small straightaway towards turn 7, we stay track left and begin to focus our vision up and to the right. Our apex is going to be on the backside of the turn, roughly 3/4 of the way up the hill. Before we begin our turn-in, we can do a slight brush of the brakes to get our front tires to bite into the hill. In many cars, a simple lift of the throttle will be sufficient before turning, with no need for any brake pedal. And our turn-in will be a little sharper than it looks, as we want to get tucked up against the curbing on the inside. Once we're tucked in, we can assertively apply our throttle up the hill. As we crest the hill, we want to let the car track out all the way to the left. We finish our turn and carry as much exit speed as possible. And every time we come through turn 7, we must be aware of our track conditions, as the outside can get very slick with marbles. Experimenting with widening our arc through the turn can yield much different and suboptimal results later in the day. After we've tracked out to the left, we need to work hard to get as far over to track right as we can. Just like our other short transitions at High Plains, we'll be better off being a half a car width or two from the track edge and facing straight than slowing down or being angled in the wrong direction just to make it to the very edge. We should be ready to brake promptly and firmly, as there is very little room to adjust our braking point when we've carried good speed out of turn 7. And we must be anticipating what we will do before we need to do it. As a general guideline, we should already be firmly on the brakes by the time we get to the set of 2 orange bollards on the right. Even a relatively small compression of the braking zone can have a large effect on our ability to slow down enough for turn 8. And, as this is another relatively slow turn, we will likely need a downshift in our braking zone as well. Our turn-in for 8 will be on the later side, about where we see the single orange bollard on the right, as we want a long, straight line out of the turn to maximize the amount of time we can spend accelerating. It's generally safe to use a bit of the curbing at the inside of the turn to help straighten it out. However, we shouldn't use it to simply make up for a poor trajectory, as we will quickly run out of room at the turn exit. Once we know we've made our apex, we can start to accelerate towards the right-hand edge as we unwind the steering wheel. Since we're in such a slow speed turn, we will likely be able to get away with adding more throttle than our steering angle would normally allow. We need to fight this temptation, however, as it's ultimately counterproductive. We'll just scrub our front tires with no additional gain in speed. Instead, we will really focus on unwinding the steering wheel and use as much of the exit road on the right as we need. If we're still finding it difficult to fully unwind or accelerate fully at the exit of the turn, we need to think about possible root causes. For example, we may be repositioning our hands on the steering wheel before turn-in instead of leaving them at 9 and 3, compromising our ability to naturally return the wheel back to its centered position. Setting up for turns 9A and 9B, more commonly referred to as the bobsled, we want to be thinking car balance. We want to continue accelerating up until our initial turn-in and hold a constant throttle as we smoothly head right and then back left. Both apexes will be on the backside of the curbing, and our transitions from side to side should feel fluid and controlled, just like a bobsled heading down its icy run. As we apex the second curb, we can begin adding more throttle if not already at maximum, as we are now pointed straight down the hill towards our next turn. Accelerating towards turn 10, we must be prepared to get on the brakes promptly and firmly, as we will need to overcome the track surface falling away from us. Our car should be positioned straight, roughly aligned with the end of the prior curb. As we apply our firm brake, we already have our head up and looking to the right. We're trying to spot the bunker at turn 11 as soon as possible. By keeping our vision far down the track and focused on where we want to end up, our hands will naturally know when and how much to turn the steering wheel to get us there. Remember, the hands go where the eyes go. Once we're aimed in the right direction, we start assertively rolling on throttle even before we've made it to the apex, as there is lots of positive camber on the inside of the turn. Remember, we're still focused down the track on the bunker, using only our peripheral vision or maybe a quick glance to keep track of our apex. And track out all the way to the left. Accelerating down our short straightaway and preparing for turn 11, we'll notice our upcoming turn is almost identical in radius as turn 2, only going uphill instead of staying flat. So, as a general guideline, if we figure out an optimal line through turn 2, we'll try to apply it in turn 11, Conversely, if we find an optimal line through turn 11, we'll try to replicate it in turn 2. On this lap, we will enter turn 11 about 2/3 of the way over to the left with a firm application of the brakes in a straight line to get our initial speed adjustment done. We may also need a downshift during our brake zone to prepare us to accelerate back up the hill once we've made our apex. Like our approach to turn 2, we'll turn in with a slow progressive arc of the steering wheel, gradually adding throttle to help bring us around the turn. The key, as always, will be having our vision up and our head turned to the right, looking for our apex on the backside of the inside curbing before we can even see it. Our goal is to be at maximum throttle once we're pointed toward the exit of the turn on the left-hand side. Remember, we're driving up a hill. Our front tires will naturally have more grip and our rear tires less. This means we can apply our throttle more assertively than if we were on flat ground, but it must still be smooth and progressive. Exiting turn 11, accelerating all the way to the left-hand edge, we'll find ourselves already at turn 12. Arguably the simplest turn to master, 12 is merely a small shallow bend in the track. We'll initiate our turn with just a small amount of steering angle back to the left, continuing our acceleration up the hill. We simply maintain that slight angle of the wheel and let the car naturally drift out to the right-hand edge of the track. We're now in the proper position to prepare our entry into the corkscrew. As we come barreling towards the corkscrew with a full head of steam, we can use our number boards out to the right as well as the orange bollards on the right-hand edge of the track as guides for where to begin braking. Most cars will begin braking somewhere between the 2 and the 3, but similar to turn 8, we need to be wary of attempting to compress our brake zone in large chunks. We squeeze on the brakes quickly and firmly to ensure we've completed an adequate speed adjustment before attempting to enter the top of the corkscrew. We will initiate our turn-in at approximately the 1 board. However, our head should be physically looking to the left, utilizing our far-ahead vision to judge when we want to turn in. As soon as we spot the leading edge of the curbing on the left, we quickly turn in with one smooth, decisive motion. We will be turning a little more to the left than we naturally want to if this were a single turn, as doing so will give us the necessary space to head back down to the right with the straightest line possible through the rest of the corkscrew. We can even cheat a little and drive up over the top of the curbing on the left, as it is fairly benign. Since our corkscrew is heading downhill, we want to maximize our ability to carry momentum at the bottom, especially as it leads us on to the second longest straightaway of the lap. This means sacrificing a little bit of entry speed at the top to put us on the optimal line through to the bottom. Attempting to charge the entry with gobs of speed, but in doing so, putting ourselves off the optimal line for the final turn, will ultimately be counterproductive. As we smoothly and decisively turn back to the right, it should feel relatively easy to complete the turn. And as we're heading down the corkscrew, we progressively add in more and more throttle, attempting to reach full throttle by the time we're pointed down the hill. At a minimum, we want to be at maximum throttle by the time we feel the compression at the very bottom of the hill. We also want to take care that we never abruptly lift off our throttle once we're traveling through the corkscrew. We should be thinking about apexing on the backside of the curb, just like carving through the moguls on our favorite ski slope. Our turn back to the left again should be just as smooth and decisive, and again feel easy to complete with our apex on the backside of the curbing. It's okay to nibble a little bit of the curbing on the inside of each turn, but if we're just driving up over the top of them, we're likely making up for a poor line. As we accelerate out of the corkscrew, we track all the way out to the right-hand edge, and look down the track as we complete our lap. Alright, let's go around one more time at full speed. Coming over start-finish, we're looking down the track. Turn 1, we lift at 3, brake at 2, turn in at 1, transition back to throttle and accelerate to the right-hand edge. Set up for turn 2 as far over as we have time for, firm brake, our head looking to the right, slow progressive turn in with our hands, using our throttle to bring us around. Accelerate to the left-hand edge of the track and all the way up to our turn in for turn 3. Lift, turn and go, our vision all the way down our straightaway. Catch a nice deep breath, check our gauges, check our mirrors. Nice firm brake into turn 4, get our downshifting done in a straight line. Taper off our brake pedal as we turn in, vision up, carry maximum speed out of the turn, prepare to brake hard for turn 5. Brake, turn in, and go. Accelerate all the way to the track edge. Smoothly transition from track right to track left. Nice firm brake as we're braking downhill. Arc around the outside of the turn, As we get to our second apex, sharply turn in. Now we can start unwinding and accelerate to the track edge. Coming into 7, our vision is up the hill. Slight brake or big lift, turn in, get the car tucked to the curbing, and accelerate up the hill, tracking out all the way to the left. As we crest the hill, work to get back over to the right. Firm brake. Turn in so we get a nice straight line out. Accelerate using all the track on the right. Dropping down into our bobsled, smooth transitions, right then left. Continue our acceleration down the hill. Vision up, nice firm brake. Spotting the bunker at turn 11, back to throttle, track out. Setup for turn 11, similar to our setup for turn 2, we get our initial speed adjustment done in a straight line. Slow progressive turn in with the wheel, use our throttle to help bring us around. Drive it hard up the hill, track out on the left. Slight steering angle back to the left for a kink at 12, and let the car naturally drift back to the right hand edge. Again, lift at 3, hard brake at 2, turn in at 1. Nice sharp turn in to the left to set up our line down the rest of the hill. Smooth and decisive, back to the right, adding throttle. Smooth and decisive, back to the left again, adding in more throttle. Track out all the way to the right and accelerate over finish. And that's our lap around High Plains Raceway. Thanks everyone.
Man, was that fun. After that great lap, I thought I'd better include another photo of Joe in his car earlier this year at COTA. And you may have noticed that his car is on the cover of the August issue of our High Gear magazine. So thanks, Joe. Thanks, Brian, for sharing that. I'm excited to get back on the track tomorrow. I wish I was going. All right, let's move on. Okay, let's move on to our track and performance driving discussion. I want to formally introduce tonight's panel, Dave, Joe, and Dale. Most of you know them, but you may not know some of the details of their successes and their experience. All three are PCA instructors. Each has won the Distinguished Driver Award. They have raced on several tracks around the country, including COTA, Watkins Glen, Sebring, Barber, Road America, Road Atlanta, to name a few. Each holds lap records for their class at several tracks, and Joe even has the fastest lap in any car at Hastings Motor Speedway in Nebraska. A little bit about Dave. He's an active member of the CDI team. From 2003 to 2007, he raced across the country with PCA and SCCA. He finished first in his class 53% of the time and was on the podium 73% of the time. And each lap that I have the opportunity to ride with him. Afterwards, I turn my very best laps. He is fast. Next up, Dale Hartzell. He started racing more recently. His first race was in 2017, and he's been national class champion every year since then, 2017, 2018, 2019. He's won 2 PCA Workers' Choice Awards, and of his 45 races, he's had 35 class wins, and 91% of our podium finishes. Last but not least is Joe Bank. You may have noticed that he was the class national champion in 2014, 2015, and was third in 2016 before he took a break away from racing. Of his 73 total races, he had 50 class wins, 26 overall wins, 85% class podiums, and 7 Workers' Choice Awards. What a group. Let's move on. Well, we can't start talking about driving on a track without talking about the warm-up lap and what's the importance of it. So Dale, why don't you start us off with a quick discussion on what we're trying to accomplish on our warm-up lap?
Sure, be happy to do that. First of all, let me say that the warm-up lap starts on the grid when you're sitting there waiting. You want to get your car up to temperature. You want your oil warm. You don't want to try to take the car out on track cold and in one lap get everything back up to temperature, because it's not going to happen. So make sure that you're using your time on grid to make sure that your oil temps are coming up and everything is ready to go out on track. Once you're released and you get out on track, the important thing is to get some heat in your tires. Now, we all go out on lower tire pressures because we know they're going to go up during the course of a session out there. So what you're trying to do is get some heat in those tires so that your pressures start to come up. You start to get your control when you go for your speed laps. The best way to do that is not weaving side to side like you see people doing all the time. That really does little to nothing to raise your tire temps or your pressures. That will scrub off some of the rubber that's on there. But really, to raise your tire temps, the best thing to do is to either drag your brakes as you're going out for part of the lap, or to speed up and slow down rapidly, like when you're bedding in brakes. That's going to generate heat in your brakes that will go through the wheels and start to heat up your tires and get your pressures up to where you want them to be. So that's really what we're focused on when we're going out there. The second thing that you're looking for on that warm-up lap is what changed on the track since last time you were on it. Is there oil dry in a corner that wasn't there before? Are there a bunch of marbles on the outside of certain turns that you really don't want to get into? So you're kind of assessing the condition of the track as you're going around on that warm-up lap as well, because you're making mental notes of, okay, you know, in this turn I need to watch out for that. So you're really doing a reconnaissance lap as well during that. You know, so that's what I'm trying to do on a warm-up lap. And at the end of it, I will do a couple of side-to-sides where I'm throwing the car pretty hard, because I want to see how the tires are gripping. If the track got hot between the last session and this one, it might have gotten loose. So you're trying to feel what kind of grip levels might be there. So you throw the car around a couple of times just to see what the tires are doing. But that's what I'm doing in a warm-up lap. Now, your mileage may vary a little bit. Joe might do a few things differently. And I'm open to comments from any of the other guys.
Yeah, Joe and Dave, any other comments you want to make?
The only thing I'd add, and Dale, that was really good. I mean, for sure, the first priority is getting heat and grip into those tires. But on that same note, in a racing scenario, I really like to know who's next to me and what kind of tires are on. Namely, are they stickers or are they scrubs? And I have been known before, if I see somebody on stickers and I'm not on stickers, to do a little bit faster warm-up lap than normal to give them less time to scrub into tires.
Dave, anything else?
Yeah, one other thing to think about is so in this group we have participant-wise everyone from club racers to people that have likely never been on the track. So the warm-up lap's exceptionally important, but everybody's going to do it a little bit different. And a lot of times you'll see people go out as fast as they can, and that's not necessarily the right thing. But you just have to be aware of the people around you. Kind of like what Joe's saying, he's looking all the way down to what tires they're running. You need to be aware of who's around you and what they're doing, because a warm-up lap isn't a normal lap for everybody. Everyone's focused in on themselves, and you need to pay attention because, you know, especially in a race scenario, you're about to have the most heated moment of the race, most likely. But everybody does it a little bit differently, and you need to really pay attention to everyone else.
Well, Dave, that's a great point. I know on my car, my pads don't warm up till really turn 13. And so I'm very cautious and slow right up until then before I get going. All right, so thank you, gentlemen. Let's move on to the start of the race. I'm not a club racer, but I'd like to know, Joe, what are you thinking when you're at the start of a race and coming down the start-finish line?
Well, I have a huge smile on my face because I'm doing something that I love. That's for sure. And this will be really good for to get my colleagues' perspectives as well, because mine's very, very biased. I mean, because of the car I'm driving, I tend to be right at the front, which is it's a nice thing. I mean, I tend to be setting the pace. So if you're on the pole, you set the pace. And so what I'm usually thinking, if I'm in that position, is again getting to be on the radio to say that the flag is out. So that if you're at the back, you know, somebody yells green, because as soon as you hear green, you can go no matter where you are. But the biggest thing that I'm doing is my left foot is on the brake, and my right foot is far down the throttle, and I'm using the brake to slow down the car so that the throttle is already down. So that's key, and that's happening no matter what gear I'm in. But what's extremely important is to make sure if I'm setting the pace, then I can set the RPMs level at the point where I know I can get the biggest launch. And that's probably the biggest advice I would give is be prepared to be in whatever gear you need to be in to make sure the RPMs are high enough so you can get that quick launch. And that includes first gear. So if you have to go into first gear, that I've had to do that before. So that's the biggest thing is making sure that the RPMs are up. My left foot's on the brake, right foot's down, and I'm watching for the green flag. And then, you know, I am making a determination of whether I'm going to start. You know, very common races start in second gear, but I have been known to start a race in first gear.
All right, Dave and Dale, anything to add?
Well, I think Joe gets a luxurious view up front. For us that are more stuck in the center of the pack, it gets really interesting at the start. The things that tend to happen in the middle of the pack are that you start accordioning like rush hour traffic, where the cars kind of run up on each other, brake, and then that starts backing everybody off. So you're trying to time it such that you're in one of your acceleration runs when the green flag drops and not in the point of, you know, being on the brakes to not hit the car in front of you. The next thing in the middle that I'm always thinking of is, where do I want to be on the track when I get to the first corner? And depending on the track, you may want to be on the inside, the outside, or the middle. And it all really depends upon what that corner is like and where everybody else is on that track. But the key is you want a good launch. You need to gain as many positions as you can at the drop of the flag, because once people start opening up and getting into the line, it gets harder and harder to pass through that first lap. So you're really looking for every advantage you can get as soon as that green flag drops.
All right, thank you, Dale. And Dave, just to keep us moving, I'm going to skip your comments if you don't mind. And let's move on to the next slide. We're going to take each section of the track independently, and I wanted to give you a quick look at the first section that we're going to look at, turns 1, 2, and 3. And keep in mind as we're talking about these turns that each car that we're talking about is different. Their horsepower is different. Shifting, gearing is different. And so you may take turn 3 in second gear. Some may take it in third, some even in fourth, depending on their gearing. So keep that in mind as you hear the comments from everybody. And the line may be just a little bit different as well, depending on the car. So with that in mind, let's go to the next slide and let's talk about turns 1 and 2. Dave, will you start out that conversation for us, please?
Will. So one thing I want to remind everyone, like Dan was saying, is we all have an opinion, every one of us, and we all have different cars. So keep an open mind and try something new next time you go out. Hopefully you pick something up here and you give it a try. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. But no matter what, it will make you a better driver as soon as you try something different. So starting at turn 1, so I'm going to talk more about DE line, and then as the other guys chime in, we'll probably talk a little bit more about race line and some other things, but I'm going to start with DE. And you're going to start to the far right of the track, and you need to be aware turn 1 is a pretty off-camber turn. So it's a pretty important turn to get right, and you really need to look ahead and look at where you're going using the whole track. So this is one of the few turns that can bite you a little bit. We won't get into that, but you really need to look ahead, brake at your, actually Brian had a great section of his video on brake points, but braking is one of the few things that I think everyone can work on. And I'll say this throughout this entire meeting, but lengthening your straightaway. So turn 1 is actually the end of the straightaway, and the more important part, in my opinion, is the end of the straightaway. The longer you can make the straightaway, the extra half second of 100 miles an hour is more valuable than a half second at 30 miles an hour. So you want to learn how to brake efficiently and effectively, but take it slowly when you start working on that. But you brake into turn 1, you brake hard and very aggressively, but smooth. Car balance is everything. And when you turn through turn 1, you're going to look as far out as you can to your exit. And in this picture, you can actually see where the exit is. It's where all the where the grass is missing on the bunker there. Generally speaking, you're going to aim for the end of that black and white gator, and many times just touch your outside tires to the edge of that. Guys, do you have any thoughts on turn 1?
No, I don't have anything to add. That's all really good. I agree with everything.
Yep,
I think it's so important to have an exact braking point and knowing where that exact braking point is every single time when you're coming into the turn.
So, and again, that's going to be where most people will make the biggest improvement in driving, is learning how their car brakes. And again, straightaways are an easy way to catch up to somebody in front of you. And it's not the horsepower, it's the brake power. If you can brake well, you will gather people up quickly. So that's turn 1. I'm going to move on to turn 2. And turn 2, I would say, probably has a fairly different line if you're going for your fastest lap versus a race lap. And we'll let some of the guys chime in on that. But a typical DE line, you're going to move into about 2/3 to the left of the track, and start turning in. There's actually, you can just barely see it in this picture. There's a little dark spot up there around the apex of the turn. There's a little bit of weird pavement there that'll actually catch your tire a little bit. Nope. Sorry, prior to the apex, just above the word turn. Whomever had the mouse. Yep. So if you go up a little bit, you can see there's tire marks there. That's where everybody's kind of lining up for the gators here. And that's because there's a little weird piece of pavement there that kind of hangs onto your tire and kind of rim shots you just a little bit. But you're going to line up. Again, it's a very, very late apex, and you're going to line up for that gator. But most importantly, if you look all the way out to the track exit, so kind of middle of in between turn 2 and turn 3, you're going to see all that dirt out there. That's where people are running their tires off the track. So tires off the track slows you down a lot. One of the things I visualize when I'm driving, not a primary thing, but something that's in the back of my head on a turn like this, is seeing in my head the back rear tires hanging off the pavement by about an inch or two. Now, generally speaking, you don't do that, but that helps you push all the way to the edge. If you're not going all the way to the edge, if you leave a foot there, you're leaving time there. Guys, any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things in turn 2 that you need to think about. First of all, as a racer, I'm not going out 2/3. I'm going out at most a car width and coming into that turn, because I'm full on the accelerator from turn 1 up until a hard brake into turn 2. And I think that's how most racers are approaching that, because it's a slow corner. You're trading off time to swing out to the left and then swing back to the right. And the other thing is, a lot of people get in trouble when they start swinging out to the left where they don't get the car straight, so their nose is pointed off to the left when they're trying to start their turn in. So you're increasing that the arc that you've got to get that nose around to get your turn in done. So that's something to watch there. The other thing is gearing on turn 2, and it's really depends on your car. I tend to, in the 996 street car, I would drop to second in there, and in the cup car, I'm also dropping to second gear for turn 2. You can take it in third gear. It just feels a little flat because you're down on the revs on your exit coming out of it. But as we get to turn 3, we can talk about that as well, because there are some things that impact how you're setting up for turn 3 coming out of 2.
All right, let's keep moving on and go to turn 3. Dale, why don't you keep talking?
So when you come out of turn 2, as Dave said, you're getting all the way over to the left of the track. And if you went down to second gear, you're going to have to shift to third, because you need to be in third coming around turn 3. If you're already in third, great. You're just going to keep your foot on that accelerator up until the point where you're ready for your turn in. Turn 3 has very few landmarks for you to focus on as you're coming up to that turn. So this is one of those corners where you have to kind of cheat and look toward the gator, because in your mind, that's your first turn-in point, is how am I arcing myself towards that gator so that I can hit my apex. But that's only to get you to turn in, and then after that, you've got to get your eyes back up and down that track, because you really need to be focused on the exit coming out of that. Now, to get into that turn in, I think Brian mentioned in his video, you have the option of either doing a lift, or you can come in and do a light brush of the brakes to bring it around. The gator is the curbing on the inside. Jay, yeah. So it really is, as you come into that corner, you've got a couple of things going on. One is you're trying to figure out, when am I going to do my shift from second to third gear? And then, am I going to lift or am I going to brake? Well, you can also make adjustments to say, can I use my shift from second to third as my lift, so that I'm combining multiple things at once and reducing the amount of time that I have to spend shifting and then lifting afterwards? So it really comes down to how do you time that corner, and it really is a combination of how you're approaching it with your shifting. Are you doing the lift? Are you doing the brush of the brakes and trying to keep your foot, do a left foot brake on that one? There's a lot of options on how you set it up, but the key to that corner is carry speed through the corner because you're going onto the straight. And as you come around that corner, you can hold your steering pretty constant for the entire duration all the way out to your track out on the exit. You shouldn't be making a lot of adjustments coming through turn 3 onto the back straight. You should be able to set that corner, hold your steering, hit the gas, come all the way out to the outside curbing. And if you've done it right in a street car with slipperier tires, you're just getting a nice little four-wheel drift going on there. And if you're doing it in something like a cup car that's got a little more stick to it, you're just laying those tires out on that curbing right to the edge of it. Joe's a little better at that than I am, and I'll let him speak to how he's handling turn 3.
The biggest thing that I'm focusing, Dale, is to your point about whether you're lifting or braking, is I'm always thinking about how do I increment it better from whatever I'm doing today. If I go through there and I'm doing a full lift and turning in and there's no drama, then the next time I go through it, I'm going to try maybe just not lifting as much, just incrementing that down. So I kind of try to hone in and try to increment the speed every time. And exactly what you said is true. If I do not have my rear wheel, and to Dave's point too, maybe an inch off of the curbing out there, I know there's more speed there. I mean, basically, that's the point where I know that's about as much as I can get based on what I'm doing. And, it's so important to try to increment the speed up there because what's next is this really long straightaway.
Yeah. And actually that corner, with 911s in particular, it's real easy to get the front end to understeer coming through that corner. And that's one of your indicators that you kind of got the entry wrong to it if you start understeering too much. The nice thing with the 911s is once you get that turn in done, you can plant that throttle and be fully accelerating out through there. And that rear end will just dig in on the car. The Caymans and Boxsters have a little, more neutral balance coming through there. So they're a little different coming through that corner.
All right, gentlemen, I'm going to step in to keep us moving. Thank you very much. Turn 3 is the most important turn on the track because it's before the longest straightaway, and that's why we want to spend more time on it. Let's skip this slide and move on to the next section. Just remember on the highway straight, check your gauges and mirrors, as it's a good place to do that. So, at a glance for this section, and before we focus on each turn of this very technical section of the track, I'd like to give you a quick tour. Turn 4 is the fastest turn on the track. Turn 2 is named Niagara because you're going downhill. Turn 5, turn 6. Well, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about Danny's lesson, turn 6. Turn 7 is High Plains Drifter. And it's a fun to feel your car drifting going up there. And then 8 is a very tight left-hander with heavy braking. So let's focus on turns 4 and 5 since they kind of go together. Maybe Joe, you want to start us out there, please.
Sure. Well, I guess the first thing I'm always thinking of, again, to Dave's point about braking and making the straightaway as long as possible, even when I'm looking at where their car is pulling me, tracking out as much as possible to tell me whether I should have been braking later or not down the back straightaway. Because that's to Dave's point, he's totally right. The braking, you're going to just gain so much speed there. So based upon how far over I'm going on the curbing on turn 4, and I tend to be about 2 to 3 inches right front wheel on the curbing there. And then the next point that's given me a clue about the braking on the highway straight is I should be feeling like I'm going to go off the track as I track out to the left, about where the arrow is. My left side tires always feels like, or it should feel like, I am fully using all of that track. Because what that tells me, I'm paying more attention to where the car is sending me to know how far I should be braking. So if I'm not maximizing those 2 areas, then I know I should be braking later. So as I come through turn 4, I am full throttle from that point. And there's really no time for me to move over. I'm lucky if I can move over maybe a car width from the left side of the track. So what I'm thinking about, again, if I'm carrying the right amount of speed, is the turn in 5. And it comes up so quick, you almost have to trust, but you get on the brakes pretty hard, but not as hard as you always think you need to, because you're braking and then turning in, and you can't really see the curbing when you do. You have to figure out your mark where you can just turn in and put that left wheel on the curbing in turn 5 and get on the gas right away. So I'm using really the most important thing I'm thinking through here is, where is my car position, not so much for the right speed for here, but what it's telling me about the braking zone. Obviously, I've got the points where I know I should be, but basically you are almost at the edge of the track on either side. So turn 4, right wheels, couple inches on the curbing. There's a point at the bottom of the curbing where it is very gentle, and then it kind of gets steeper. And if I'm carrying the right speed through there, then I'm back on the gas fully and not a lot of time to come over to the right at all. And then I'm braking probably not super hard, but enough to send a weight forward and then turn and on the gas. So it's kind of a dance of getting that fluid motion through there. And, again, the biggest thing is where the track is ending up with the car. It tells me I could possibly braking, I don't know, another car length further. And that there's a lot of information that's being sent to you through these turns.
All right, Dave and Dale, any other comments? I know that we could talk all day on this one.
I very much agree. I think your track out, where you end up after the turn, tells you everything about how you started the turn. That sounds really simple, but it's much more complicated than that. And if you brake correctly, you will end up at the very edge of track out. If you're braking early, you're not going to make it all the way out there. If you brake late, you're going to hang tires off or go off. So it's just it's a very good way of judging what Joe was explaining.
The other comment I would make is turn 5 is the one where I see a lot of people make the mistake where they're so focused on getting back to the right side of the track that they wind up again with the car pointed off to the right side, so that they're creating this much bigger arc that they've got to swing the car through to get it back around the corner. It's really important to get that car straightened out before you come into turn 5, because you're going to give up a lot of time and a lot of speed if you have to bring that nose around too far.
There's also a ton of grip in turn 5.
Yeah, there's a lot of camber there.
Yeah, and it feels like you're kind of going down a little bit into it, so it feels like you got to brake really hard. But if you can get the motion right of, brake a little bit less the next time you go through there, but get the car turned in and get in there, because there's a ton of grip right in turn 5, more than it seems like you would have.
And then back to track exit again. At the exit of turn 5, you can see a little dust patch over there, and that is where the really the second half of that is where your right rear tire should be basically hanging on the edge of the pavement.
Yeah.
And there's a pretty big drop off. You don't want to go off there because so many people do go off there. But your tire should be right at the edge. And if you're not getting over there, you're slowing down too much for turn 5.
All right. Well done, gents. Yes, on turn 4, find your exact braking point again. Think smoothness and car balance. Take advantage of all that German engineering, and I strongly suggest staying off the apex berm or just get on it just a little, as Joe mentioned. But and then keep your momentum entering into 5. So thank you. All right, let's move on to turn 6, Danny's lesson.
Okay, can we address Michael's question real quick here?
Oh, sure.
So in the race car, I am doing the 5-4 shift on braking, but when I was driving the 996 street car, I would actually do the shift between 4 and 5. It really depends on what you're comfortable with.
All right. So turn 6. You know, we spent an entire advanced driver classroom session just talking about turn 6. And it's named after Danny Collins. Danny said that every good track should have a decreasing radius turn, and turn 6 is just a study of that. And I'm going to hand it off to Dave and have him start the conversation about this, as there are multiple lines through here on how to take this turn.
So this turn probably has more conversation than any other turn on the racetrack. And that's because it's probably one of the hardest turns. It's a slow turn. It's got a hill to climb when you're done with it. And so if you get it right, gravity's fighting you all the way up what's considered probably the 3rd longest straight on the racetrack. So it's important to get it right. That said, everybody's got their own version. So what I tend to do is the same thing I said earlier. I think that between turn 5 and turn 6 is a downhill straightaway, which is a fantastic thing. You can get a lot of speed on a downhill straightaway. It's very beneficial for times. So in that theory, I try and extend that straightaway as much as possible. So if you come out of turn 5, you'd be on the far right side of the track. You gently work your way back over to the left. There's plenty of time. And then I will actually initiate a small turn towards the back side of the turn and initiate my braking at that point after this small turn. So basically what I'm doing is I'm trying to extend my brake point into about halfway through the turn. So I'm in a GT3 street car, and I like the cars to be set up to have a little bit of oversteer. So that said, the cars will pivot really well. And in this turn, you're going downhill fast. You're on the brakes hard, which lifts weight off of the rear tires, puts a ton of grip on the front tires, so you can turn pretty heavily and aggressively, and the back end's a little bit light, so the car will rotate very easily. And then you can get on the gas early. And for the climb, if you don't have a super high horsepower car, you really want to be on the gas as early as possible here, because it is a long uphill. If you've ever driven a spec Boxster or an older 911 with, a low horsepower number, this hill seems like it takes forever. So you want to be on the gas as early as possible for this. Any other thoughts from the other guys?
The only, I think our lines are very similar, Dave. I mean, the only thing I'm always focusing on here is trying to get off the brakes a little bit quicker, getting on the gas, not a lot, but a lot sooner. And because it's funny, this is such a slow part of the track, but I do find, and I can see on the dash, based upon what I do, there is some time to be had there. The other part is just making sure to track out and use all of the curbing exit on the left. My front left tire, rear left tire are fully on that curbing and just getting a great launch out of there.
So we've got a question there, how to set up for a rotation at the apex. It's kind of hard to explain without having control of a mouse to point here, but this might help us a little bit here. So here in the yellow section, the turn, yes, you would actually cut that corner. You wouldn't be as far to the left. You'd be a little bit more center track and braking in a straight line in this direction. Then about where the mouse is, you're going to brake pretty heavily, and that's the point where, actually maybe just a touch further, is where you're going to brake hard enough to lift the rear of the tires, not quite loose, but to where the car will pivot. And you'll know, once you practice pivoting the car at this corner, you'll know when it feels, I mean, it'll pivot and lock in, and you'll feel it right away. And that's when you start accelerating pretty hard. You obviously have to look for your track out and get lined up correctly. But that's about the point where you're going to try and pivot the car.
All right, and why don't we keep going to turn 7 and 8? Dave, why don't you keep on going?
Right, so turn 7, in my opinion, is probably the most fun turn on the racetrack. When you get this turn right, you almost want to leap out of your seat at the end of it, and for joy, because it was so much fun. It feels like an old roller coaster. But it's a big, fast, the guys with the data out there might be able to confirm this, but I believe it is the highest G-force turn that we have on this racetrack. But basically, it's a very high-speed sweeper going up a blind turn that you really can't see very well. So what I am thinking about, being that it's a blind turn, is my initial lineup, and it's something that you have to learn over time. Seat time is king when it comes to learning how to drive, but you have to know where the track exit is without being able to see it. And so a exact turn in is key. And if you can turn in correctly, you're going to apex this turn probably, I'm going to say, about 2/3 of the way up that gator there. Yeah, right in there. But you should be full throttle before you get to it in this turn. Assuming you're comfortable with, you don't jump out and do that full throttle right away. But as you learn this turn, the harder you get on the gas, the better the car sticks, and you can actually steer it with the gas pedal. So when you set your steering wheel at the bottom of turn 7, you'll set your steering wheel, you'll hit your apex. Without moving the steering wheel, you should be able to keep your foot on the floor. The car will drift over to the track exit, this kind of just above the back of the arrow up here. And again, without turning your steering wheel, the car will drift back over to the right side of the beginning of turn 8. So in theory, if you line up correctly, from the bottom of turn 7 to the start of turn 8 is one steering input. The rest of it's all gas pedal. Hard on the gas up the hill, and then the car will drift out, it'll catch up at the top, and it'll start working its way back in. If you can do that correctly, it's a very smooth, fun turn that it's one of those like victories when you hit this turn right. It's just a blast. And a lot of times I'll prep some of you guys, because I really hope all of you try and work on this turn a lot. But if you get turn 7 right, really right, there's a very good chance you're going to blow turn 8 because you're going so fast. Turn 8 comes up on you really, really quickly, and it's an exceptionally heavy braking point if you go through turn 7 correctly, and it's a very sharp turn. So comments on turn 7?
Yeah, I agree on the single steering input, and if you've done it right, you're going to actually come up right between the second and third braking markers on the right side as you approach turn 8. And as you say, it's very quick because that second braking marker is kind of your last chance to brake at that corner.
Joe, any thoughts?
Yeah, the only thing I'd add is the setup to turn 7 is, you know, if you're doing a lift, which I have to do, I'm not using any brakes, but I'm doing a lift. Is again, I'm incrementing. If I'm doing an 80% lift, and that feels like there's no drama, the next time I go through, I'm going to try to get it to a 70% lift, because all that just nets more gain as you come around there.
So, and that's great progressive driving thought that everyone needs to have. You know, if you hit the turn right and you know you hit it right, change something. Think about how you set up the car in the beginning. Think about how you set up for turn 8. Try changing something one way or the other. Small increments. If it's an 80% lift to a 75% lift, try changing it and see what happens. And some of the guys with data, you can see exactly what's happening. But you have to keep trying different things to excel your driving skill and become better. While we're talking about that, one thing I like to do with some intermediate students and myself is take turns offline. Take it offline. If you're in a race, Joe and Dale racing, they're not always on the right line. They have to adjust the turn to wherever they happen to be. If they've got someone next to them, they can't necessarily have the perfect driving line. So trying new things and changing it up will only make you a better driver and understand the dynamics of the car and the track better.
The other thing I'll say in turn 7 going up to turn 8 is I'm in third gear the whole time, and if I've done it right, I am at the rev limiter at about 8,000 RPM right at the braking point for turn 8.
All right, let's move on to turn 8. Dave, take us through there, and we're already bumping up to 8:15, and so we'll progress a little faster, but we're probably going to run a little late because this is fun.
All right, turn 8. I'm going to try and make it fast here. Turn 8. We've talked about getting into turn 8. It's a pretty aggressive turn. There's plenty of runoff there, so if you do have an issue, there's plenty of room to go off and figure it out. But the gators there are somewhat big, but the car is so loaded to the right side on this turn that you can touch them just a little bit and it won't affect the car balance at all. So I recommend using them. And the turn, in my opinion, is a little bit earlier than most people think that it is. And again, this is kind of like what Joe was talking about at turn 4. It's really about where you come out of this turn that defines how you get into it. So it's not something you learn in one track, but when you exit this turn, you should really be basically at the point of this turnoff here. The first part of the turnoff, right in there, is where you should be coming out. Your right side tires should be just inching off the pavement right there, and you can even use that road there as a little bit of an arc to where you would exactly just like that. If you're coming out here if you slide the mouse back a little bit into this dirt section by the gators, if your car is coming out anywhere near here, you are turning in way too early, and it's shooting you out a little bit early on the track here. But you really need to judge where you're coming out. And this turn is a great indicator, because if you don't open the wheel back to turn out, you will scrub a ton of speed off here. So you really have to finesse the car back over to the track with as much throttle as possible, but without scrubbing it. And so once you know how to exit the turn, then you can start monitoring how to get back into it. Anyone else?
Well said.
Yep. And the other thing is coming out of turn 8, you're actually setting up for a really high speed section of the track if you've done it right, because you're going to carry a ton of speed between 8 and 10.
Yep.
All right, let's keep moving. This is a really fun section of the track. To hell on a bobsled, Like I said, it's really fun, but it takes some nerve to keep the pedal down as you go through there. It's deceptively fast. And Joe, why don't you run us through this whole section?
Sure, I agree, Dan. I love this section because it's all timing, and you got to be smooth on every point. And when you do, it's just really fast. So, my car's a 2018 GT3 Cup. It's 485 horsepower, but it weighs 2,650 pounds. But that, I'm telling you that so that you have a perspective of what you could work up to, because even in that car, if I do come out of turn 8 the way Dave described properly, I can go full throttle. I'm 100% throttle from that point down to the braking zone into 10. And anything short of that, I screwed something up. So my right side of the tires are on the initial set of curbing. Brian, can you move the mouse over to that? Yep. And then immediately, just as a fluid motion, you're trying to straighten this out as much as you can, but the natural line of the car is you should have your left side of the car on the curbing where it says turn 9B. The next really most important thing, because there's really not a whole lot of change from the throttle position, but is being smooth with the steering wheel. But if you do all that right and you've come on a turn 8 right, as Dan said, you're carrying a ton of speed. So what I'm next thinking about is braking, but not braking super hard, because it's again going to be such a quick motion of braking, send the weight forward, turn the steering wheel. It's kind of actually turn 5 is pretty similar that way. So if I do that right, my eyes right in the braking zone are already looking past the apex and turn 10, because the next thing that's coming up on you, and you can't see it on this photo, I think it's an older photo, but there is curbing on the track out to the left as soon as you come through turn 10. Yep, exactly. And that's another area that lets me know where I end up if I maximize that corner. So again, my left side of the car, I should feel like those tires are going to go off. They don't, because there's only a couple inches off of them. But just use that where your position ends up to tell you whether you were over braking prior to turn 10 or you're not on the gas hard enough. And you got to pick a point at whatever level you're at and try something different, try to increment it. If you're really feeling hesitant through 9A and B to go full throttle, that's fine. Then go 90% or 80%. Just pick a point where there's no drama and then increment it up. So then once I've tracked out coming through turn 10 on the curbing, you can't see there, I am starting to make my way halfway in the middle of the track and coming into turn 11. And this is another turn where, again, if I can brake at a certain level and let the car naturally rotate at a very late apex here through turn 11, and there's no drama, I'm going to try to come off the brakes quicker. And, I'm not looking for the drama. You can kind of feel it before it's coming, but I'm looking for the point where I need to improve upon what I'm doing to carry more speed. The line I take through this is halfway entry with a late apex and trying to get on the gas to full throttle because you're about to come up a hill. So there's actually a lot of grip there. And again, how far my car carries me out to track out coming out of turn 11 gives me a sense of whether there was more there. I mean, and we all have the points of where we're doing it today, but if you really feel like it is just so smooth and there's no drama, I would encourage you to try to increment something towards where you're going to carry more speed. either get on the gas a little bit sooner, even if it's just a hair, or don't brake as hard coming into turn 11. But all those things I'm constantly looking for to turn a faster lap time.
Can I jump in there real quick?
Yeah.
So one of the things I try and tell anybody that I'm riding with, and this one turn 11 is such a great point to judge yourself as a driver without having anybody else in there. But turn 11 is a turn that you notoriously hit the gas too early, and then you have to brake. You have to lift off to straighten the car and then get on the gas again. This is one of those turns where you have to focus, and it'll take a few laps to do it, but you focus on getting on the gas pedal one time. The worst thing you can do going up a hill is ever have to let off the gas.
Yeah.
But if you go around turn 11 and you put the gas pedal all the way down and you can keep it down, you know you got it right. If you have to lift to make a correction, you entered the turn a little bit incorrectly. But it's a really, really easy way to judge. Just pay attention to your right foot. If you lift up a little bit, you messed up. If you can keep it down the whole time, you nailed it.
To the question about gear, in my car, I'm in third gear through there.
So I'm dropping to second gear to go through turn 11 so I get enough grunt going up the hill. And then I'm shifting back to third just about turn 12.
I'm normally in third gear unless I'm really trying to put a time down for some reason, then I'll drop down to second.
Yeah. One other comment I'll make back on turn 9. The biggest mistake I see students make in 9A is they hold the right-hand turn too long. You're going to feel the car start to fight you. The weight's going to transition, and you should go with that. If you're fighting the car in 9A, it means you're turning in late for 9B, and that's what kills a lot of people's setup coming down that section. You really just need to flow through there. As Joe said, it's really an arc to the right through 9A, and then the weight transfers to the left, and you arc to the left through 9B. And then as you feel the weight go neutral, you can brake and then start your turn in for turn 10 as you load up the left-hand side of the car and arc through 10. It's a really great flow section of the track, and when you get it right, it just feels good. I love the whole back half of the track. That's my favorite playground.
You really have to focus through this whole section on being really smooth and having very soft hands and delicate through 9A and B. Turn 10, actually, it looks off camber, but really it isn't. And there is a groove right there between the pavement and the berm that actually can lip you around to some extent. And the track off area is a lot larger, as you see there, versus how it looks on the track. Another point I want to make, if you do go off the track there, drive up to the turn 11 corner worker station before re-entering the track. It's a lot safer for everyone coming around turn 10. All right.
Always go off the track straight there.
Yes. Let's move on to turns 13, 14, and 15, the Prairie Corkscrew. Dale, why don't you take us through there?
Sure. Love this section of the track. Again, this is very similar to Hell on a Bobsled, where it's all about your rhythm and timing coming through these corners. If you've come out of turn 11 correctly, as Dave said, and you're on that gas, you should be on the gas fully up until your braking point for turn 13. And coming into 13, I'm basically holding third gear all the way up, and if I've done it right, I'm running out of revs, and I'm hitting the rev limiter right about the time I get to my braking point up there. Typically, I'm trying to brake around the second brake marker coming into turn 13, and I want to set up, as the video described, with a little bit of a later turn in so that I'm hugging the left-hand side at the top of turn 13, because what I want to do is really set up as straight a shot as I can through 14 and 15. If I've done turn 13 correctly, I'm going to make that left with a late apex, hang to the left side of the track just a little bit, and then as I see that straight line through 14 and 15, I'm going to do my turn in. Now, you should be full on the throttle at that point. there is no lifting. There shouldn't be any lifting coming through here at that point. What you're doing coming through 14 and 15 is you'll have very small movements of the steering wheel just to keep the car lined up between it. What's going to throw a lot of people off is that as you come into your turn in for 15, you're going to want to turn in late. You're going to hold that right-hand turn on 14 too long. And the reason you're going to turn in late is because the track goes a little bit off camber, and your front end is going to wash out for that left-hand turn on turn 15 a little bit if you're going full throttle through there. You want to turn in a little bit early. Your front end's going to wash out, and then as you bottom down at the bottom of the hill, that front end is going to instantly have grip, and it will just grab and pull you right around the corner. And you've got that beautiful exit curb that you want to use at least half of. Joe's going to use everything plus a couple inches on it. But you're going to come out of that corner and use every bit of track and carry as much speed as you can onto that front straight. In my mind, the front straight starts at the top of turn 14. If you're not full throttle coming out of there, you've blown it.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you meant tune 13 maybe, Dale, but it's exactly what Dale said. It's, if you carry the speed right, the one thing I'd add is just don't forget when you're coming out of turn 15, don't look at the curbing at the track out. Look far straight down the track, because you're going to be carrying so much speed. If you look at the curbing at track out, there's a higher degree chance that you're going to drop a wheel through there. I mean, if I do it right, I'm telling myself, look straight ahead, look straight ahead. The other thing, too, is always fun for everybody is if you're feeling like you're on a really good lap, this is the last section of it. So there's a lot of, tension to just get it perfect because, this is the last part. But just the biggest part is for me is if I'm doing everything as Dale said, I am nearly 100% throttle from 13 down, and I have to tell myself, look straight ahead, do not look at the curbing and track out, because you're just carrying too much speed, and it'd be so easy to go off there.
Yep.
It's interesting, the entry into 13, it's all uphill, so everything's working in your favor for a later braking zone and a more aggressive braking. So,
Well, it's all uphill, but it then flattens out at the turn-in points at 13. So you got to make sure you get your braking done before it flattens out. Otherwise, your front end goes light, and that's when you go long.
exactly, it looks innocent, but it's a sight of many spins because your back end does elevate going through 13 if you don't quite get it right.
Well, and I think, I don't know how long ago Glenn improved the curbing up there, but it is significantly improved. It's wider and it's flatter. And I hadn't been to the track in a while, and when I drove it just yesterday, actually, you can really turn in a little bit earlier than you used to be able to, because the curbing feels wider. I don't know if you guys have adjusted since it's been changed, but I certainly noticed that.
For sure, and it's not very tall anymore, so you can hit it fairly hard without disrupting the car.
Yeah, it's pretty low drama.
Yep.
Yes, when I'm going through there, I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, and at the minute I see the blue and white curbing is when I start my turn in. And I actually go over a lot of that berm.
Yeah, great.
All right, any more comments there?
Nope.
Well, we've done a complete lap. Are there any questions that we need to answer?
Are we off mute, Dan?
No. Yeah, I think. Whatever you think, Brian.
Yeah, you can either hit the raise your hand button and we'll call on you. You can also put your question in the chat if that's easier for you. Jay, you should be unmuted now.
Oh, cool. Hey, guys.
Hey.
So I saw a question about simulators in there, and I'm going to confess I don't use a simulator. Sometimes I'll use the PlayStation just to learn a new track because I really want to learn the layout before I go there. But you know, I'm a huge fan of studying video. So when I went to Road America, you know, there's a great lap by one of the pro drivers of how to drive Road America. Watch that. You learn. Where are they braking? Where are they turning in? What kind of marks are they trying to hit? You know, the key when you're racing and going to a new track is cutting down your learning curve for that track, and anything that you can do to do that in terms of learning, you know, what to expect on the corners, what to expect in braking, revs, speed, gearing. There's a lot of great information out on the web if you start searching YouTube.
Dale, do you find it hard if you're using video or simulator to truly get a feel for elevation change?
It will throw you off because it's very flat from that perspective. I mean, you go someplace like COTA where the front straight climbs up 2 stories or 3 stories, and you know, you just don't realize it when you're looking at a video.
All of this intense skill withstanding, I've been to the ring twice. I've got about, I don't know, 50, 60 laps. And simulator training for it was really helpful, actually, because there's so many corners. But it didn't replace the elevator rush, that's for sure.
Well, that's why I say, I mean, it really, even the video games are good enough because what you want to learn is, you know, what's the sequence of corners? Where's the left? Where's the right? Is it an open corner? Is it a tight corner? High speed, low speed. You can get a feel for that on even the most rudimentary driving video games these days, and a good portion of the tracks that exist have been turned into a video game for your use. So you don't even have to have the $1,000 simulator to go out and do a lot of these things. But you know, at that next level, you can get a lot more feedback as well if you start to have some of the tacit feedback coming through you.
Oh, I spent $5 grand, and Dave Stribling now has it. So the next beer party's at Dave's house.
Now I know why Dave's so good.
Yeah, three panels, and you know, $3 grand in billet aluminum, you know, peripherals. It's fun though. But this is so awesome, you guys. I just want to. I'll shut up. But thanks a lot, Joe and Dave and Dale, Dan. This is so fun. Thank you.
I'll speak up really quick. I like Jay said, I have a simulator now, and but I can't say enough for driving a different track. High Plains is great. I can't say enough about it. But as a driver, the more tracks you can drive and the more tracks you can learn, the more outside of your comfort zone you get. But then all of a sudden your comfort zone gets a lot bigger once you learn the track. So the more seat time, the more you can be in a car learning something new, the better you're going to be when you get back to your home track, High Plains. I can't say enough about it, whether it's in a YouTube or a simulator or best of all in a real car at the track. But you just have to keep learning.
I'm going to turn that around a little bit, and I'm going to say High Plains is a great training ground for the other tracks in the country. Mm-hmm. The technical nature of this track, the diversity of corners that we have, prepares you for just about every other track in the country, with the exception of the ones that are really high-speed sweeping tracks. You know, the Road Americas with the kink where you're bombing through there at ridiculous speeds. We don't have a good carousel like at Road America, you know, but it makes life a lot easier when you have elevation. You understand blind corners. You understand downhill braking and turning into sharp corners. There are a lot of tracks in this country that are just flat, you know, and it makes a huge difference. I think Joe and I are always amazed when racers come to High Plains from out of state. It takes them a good amount of time to learn how to drive our track quickly, which we take for granted because we've done so many laps around it.
You're correct. It's a very technical track. And Eric had a question there. How fast are you going entering into turn 4? And Eric, I don't know until I look at the data. The last thing I'm looking at while I'm on the racetrack is the speedometer. I'm focused on the tachometer. And I don't know if you guys have comments on that as well, but do you ever look at the speedometer?
No,
No.
I didn't even see it.
So the other part of Eric's question was, I think I'm braking too hard out of fear. And I have a little anecdote there. I definitely found going through turn 4 that when I had a car in front of me and I had to sort of slow up a little bit to make sure I didn't jump right on their bumper, I would actually go through turn 4 faster than when I had clear track in front of me. And I started putting 2 and 2 together, that when I had clear track, I was, kind of psyching myself out and trying to grenade the brakes because now I'm going really, really fast. And then I would, go, in some cases, 5 or more miles an hour slower through the turn. So what I tried to start doing was not worry so much about pushing in my my brake point in 4, but think about my minimum speed. And once I kind of got a feel for what that minimum speed was going through the apex, then I could start inching the sort of begin of braking point to work up to how do I get to that minimum speed with the right amount of pressure, as opposed to trying to figure out what that minimum speed is when I'm applying the brakes at the hardest point and sort of guessing in a way at what that's going to result in for the minimum speed. Just my approach to it.
One other comment I just wanted to make in the context of doing other tracks, because I 100% agree. I really feel like when I started to do that, my driving really improved. And I don't know if everybody's aware of this, but when I first started doing DEs, and then we'd have our club race and we had a super DE, I thought that was unique to our region. And just so you all know, there's a super DE at every club race wherever it is. I think I don't think I've ever been to a race where there wasn't a super DE. So if you're a solo driver, you can go to another track with PCA pretty easily, as long as you're signed off to drive solo, and just do it at the club race, but at their super DE, because there's always one at every track. If you guys haven't been to Miller, that's a really good track to really hone up on your skills of how to pick up I don't even know, how many corners are there, Dale? 24 or something like that?
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's a great track.
Miles long.
Go to the Nürburgring.
We've got a question from John's got his hand raised. John Goggin, what's your question?
Hey, talk about ABS. I've heard different things about how much ABS to use going into a corner. I hear if you've got racing ABS, you want to use the ABS a lot. If you have street car ABS, you don't want to use it at all. What are your thoughts on that?
So it's really interesting. I've got a 996 Cup, and I have racing ABS, but I'm going to say that my goal is not to use it too much. I want to be right on the cusp of my ABS, because I think it's still a little more primitive in the 996s. I think in the 991 Cup that Joe drives, ABS is probably phenomenal. Much better balance, doesn't upset the car as much. It was interesting. I was watching the IMSA race here last weekend or the weekend before, and one of the drivers was talking about his teammate was teaching him how to brake, and his teammate was saying, get into the ABS as hard as you can and then get back out to maximize your braking. So that was a pro driver's perspective on the newer cars.
So one thing to think about braking, and this involves all ABSs, because they're all a little bit different depending on what brake pads you have and what tires you have. They're all going to engage a little bit differently. But the thing to really focus in on braking is when you're going faster, you can brake harder. So you can brake much harder at the initial pedal application, and you have to start releasing off of it. As you slow down, your adhesion to the ground your tire's going slower, so it's going to eventually lock up if you don't start letting off the pedal. So you have to find the maximum grip of braking. and it's going to be higher pressure at the beginning and less pressure as you start slowing the car down. But you really, I would say, generally speaking, you want to try and avoid it. It does unsettle your car, ABS, and even on the newest cars, and they're programmed well enough, especially with a stock car. Now, once you start messing with pads and things, it's a little bit different, but they're generally programmed well enough that you can do a complete threshold brake without engaging in it, and hitting it does you no benefit.
All right, thanks.
Yeah, actually, for me, ABS is the great indicator of when my tires have gotten too high in pressure and they're starting to go away.
We've got another question from Eric. He was asking, in turn 6 and 11, do you try to start understeer to start and then more as you approach the apex?
Well, I'm definitely not looking to understeer. I'm not, if I'm understanding the question right, is it, I'm not looking to understeer. I mean, honestly, with turn 6, for me, if the tires are good, I don't have a lot of understeer through there. So the biggest thing is to get off of the brakes and get that car turning, so that, you know, the quicker I'm pointing straight, the quicker I can get to full throttle out of there. And so if it's understeering, you might want to think about adjusting your line or your braking, because if the car's understeering a lot, it's going to be very painful going through that corner.
That might also say you've got too much steering and too much throttle, so you may have turned in too early on that corner too.
Yep, exactly.
And another thing is you might not have gotten the car to pivot correctly. If the car doesn't pivot well, if you don't get enough weight on those front tires, it will never turn in.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's already a slow corner, so it's going to feel really slow after that.
We're an hour and a half in. Let's take one or two more questions and then call it a night. Are there a couple more out there, Brian?
Not seeing any on the chat. Lots of folks are going to be investigating how they can get HPR in their simulator. That's really cool to see.
Well, tremendous. Well, it's time to call this to a close, but I don't know about all of you, but I'm as excited as heck about getting back out on the track and driving and maybe trying a few things a little bit differently than I've been doing it currently. Dave, Dale, Joe, I can't thank you enough. Your expertise is just shining all evening here. I can't thank you enough. And Brian and Jim, thank you for your contributions as well. So everyone have a good evening, good night, and thank you.